Ah, nature. A place to get away from it all. To take a break from the rat race and reconnect with the earth.
A place to run for your life.
The gentle, bubbling brook. The symphony of birdsong.
The blood-curdling screams.
Shall we take a hike through the beautiful, breathtaking mountains?
Or take a breathtaking axe to the chest.
The story is what you build it. I'm just here to set the scene. So, without further ado, let's take a trip out to Rocky River Retreat. Welcome to TrikBrix. Hello again, everyone. I'm Jamie. In case you couldn't tell, I'm writing this script smack dab in the middle of spooky season. And thanks to a steady diet of classic 80s slashers as of late, I felt inspired to give this showcase a bit of a twist. But before we get too crazy, the stats. 6552 Rocky River Retreat was released in 1993. Contains 241 pieces, 2 minifigures, and originally retailed for the rather odd price of $29.75. Adjusted for inflation, that would be close to $70 today. And some of you may know this by its alternate moniker of Coyote Canyon. We've seen a ton of camping-centric sets from LEGO over the decades, and many of them are fantastic, but very few give us this big of a slice of nature. More often than not, opting for just a vehicle or just a cabin, forgoing the surrounding wilderness. I feel like this puts Rocky River Retreat in an exclusive group and could be part of the reason why it ranks in the top 5% of all classic town sets, according to Brickset users. But hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to decide for yourself if it lives up to that hype. That is, if your heart can stand to make it that far. We begin our story with two seemingly unassuming minifigures. Let's call them Bill and Mary. They're both fairly nondescript, made up of simple elements shared by many Legoland townsfolk. Bill sports a red ball cap and green vest, as well as a pair of sunglasses and a 5 o'clock shadow. Mary has opted for a blue windbreaker and gray cowboy hat, and couldn't bear to be seen without her lipstick and a heavy dose of mascara. But the most important thing in the world to them right now is her backpack, or rather, what's inside it. Because despite their cleverly bland disguises, Bill and Mary are thieves. Jewel thieves, to be precise. This nearly priceless blue gem, the world-famous indigo shard, was all set to be auctioned off that evening at a benefit for the local children's hospital. But Bill and Mary had other plans. And those plans are going off without a hitch. In fact, we're joining them on their getaway out of town, masquerading as campers heading for a weekend at the lake, where they'll hop in the boat and escape north into Canada, where their mysterious buyer anxiously awaits. Like I said, these are pretty generic 90s figs, but for what it's worth, Bill's face print is one of my favorites from this time period. And Mary's face print had only just been introduced the previous year in Paradisa. I do like her cowboy hat, but it would have been nice if a proper hairpiece had been included as well. I prefer this look, so I'm gonna stick with it for the time being. This rugged 4x4 will be perfect for traversing the wild, winding terrain around the lake. It comes equipped with a light bar and side mounts for a pickaxe and a fishing pole. And to be certain they'll have plenty of ground clearance for their journey off-road, Bill opts for a suspension upgrade, which really takes this SUV to the next level. The interior is relatively spacious, featuring a decently sized cargo area able to accommodate all kinds of illegal luggage. But since their plan is to assume completely new identities after selling the jewel, they're traveling light, sharing a single suitcase between them. And that's just as well, since having only one seat up front, Mary will need to squeeze in back here. Or at least try to. The simple trailer cradles their true getaway vehicle, which is also going to be a tight fit for both of them. But what matters is that it's light, fast, and nimble, all essential qualities when it comes to fleeing the country. They're counting on this powerful outboard motor to propel them to freedom. I absolutely love this truck, especially when upgraded with the suspension axles. And it's worth mentioning that these single-piece dual window elements only came in yellow in 3 sets. And I do really like the yellow color scheme here. I do wish there was room for both minifigures to sit in here, but we are dealing with a 90s Lego vehicle after all. This fishing pole is also super cool, featuring a long string and modified plate for a hook. The fish element we all know so well wouldn't come out until 2009, which is unfortunate because it would have worked perfectly here. As for the trailer and boat, they're both pretty standard, with the latter being a fairly common design at the time, but they're a welcome inclusion nonetheless. Okay, back to the story. Having slipped out of town, successfully evading the law along the way, dusk turns to darkness as the crooks find themselves surrounded by an increasingly wild landscape. And while it seems like their luck is holding out, the weather definitely isn't. A fierce storm rolls in and begins to pelt the terrain. However, Bill and Mary's spirits remain undampened by the rain, as all they can think of is the biggest payday of their criminal career, just waiting for them on the other side of the lake. So close, they can almost smell it. But in a flash, something huge bounds onto the road directly in front of them, and Bill reacts without thinking, swerving erratically in an unsuccessful attempt to avoid it. Steel meets flesh and bone, and the truck veers headlong into the trees, where it comes to an abrupt halt with a deafening crunch. Dazed, Bill and Mary slowly regain consciousness and climb from the wreckage. The truck totaled, and with no other way to transport the boat, their clear path to fortune and glory was now wiped away in an instant. How were they going to make their rendezvous with the buyer on time? Racking his rattled brain, Bill notices that their victim was a horse. A horse with a saddle. That meant there must be people nearby. And being so close to the lake, it was a good bet those people had a boat. Determined not to miss the most lucrative engagement of their lives, they gather their things and set off through the woods in the direction the unfortunate horse came from, dead set on finding where its owner called home. But unbeknownst to Bill and Mary, its owner had already found them, and is dead set on something else entirely. Drenched and aching, they trek through the dense brush for what seems like miles, until, just when it appears as though they're for sure on a fool's errand, the trees give way to a clearing. And in that clearing stands a small, dilapidated cabin next to a stream. Unfortunately for our pilfering pair, it appears to be abandoned, with no boat in sight. But they press on, hoping against hope that perhaps the cabin contains some way to get in touch with their buyer, a radio by chance. It's a long shot, but worth a try. They cautiously approach the rickety old rope bridge. Though slick with rain and ravaged by entropy, it seems safe enough to cross, so they begin to do so. But halfway across, Bill stops. He thought he heard something over the sound of the rushing stream far below. After a moment, though, he decides that it was just his imagination. But as he goes to take another step, the bridge bounces slightly. And then the sound of snapping rope rings out. Suddenly, the slippery planks beneath their feet begin to sway violently, and a terrified Bill and Mary have to grab the ropes as the bridge gives way completely. After dangling precariously, wondering what on earth could have happened, they managed to pull themselves to the safety of the ridge. Now they were trapped on this side of the river. With no other option, they descend the rock face and find themselves standing outside the eerie cabin. There's no sign of life anywhere, just an old well pump and a collection barrel. Still hoping to find a way out of this mess and get them back on track, Bill cautiously opens the creaky door. The interior is sparsely furnished, with just a bed, chair, table, and an old lantern. Thankful for this, Bill lights it up to get a better look around, hoping he'd missed the radio. But there isn't one. However, a doorway to the left promises more to discover. As they make their way into the adjoining room, the door slams shut violently. Probably just the wind. Stepping into what seems to be the entrance to an abandoned mine, Bill and Mary are surprised to find a cache of curious equipment. This metal detector looks brand new. And what was a chainsaw doing in a mine? Who could these belong to if the cabin is abandoned? Just then, Mary hears a clatter and whips around to find nothing. Bill was gone. She calls out for him in a panic, but to no avail. Then comes the sound of something wooden clunking against the stone floor. Mary grabs up the lantern and wildly whips it around, completely terrified. The tiny light does little to pierce the darkness, but then, to Mary's horror, something begins to emerge from the cold shadows. She lets out a blood-curdling scream and begins to back away, but not before a swing of the prospector's pick slashes her arm. It was time to run. She turns and begins sprinting deeper into the mine, but is quickly tripped by something on the ground. Bones clatter across the floor. With her terror multiplying by the second, she manages to pelt the silent monster with the remains of what must be his former victims, buying herself a few precious moments to escape. She scrambles to her feet and resumes her fearful flight through the labyrinth of tunnels and caves. Minutes seem like hours, as the oppressive darkness soon overtakes her bearings and she finds herself completely lost. This was a dead end. And then she hears that sound again. Nearly paralyzed by fright, Mary watches as the prospector once again begins to materialize from the shadows, moaning, his arms outstretched. Horrified, she drops the lantern and cowers backward, pressing herself against the cave wall. But then she remembers her backpack, the indigo shard. With no time to spare, she whips the jagged jewel out and with all the strength she can muster, plunges it directly into her attacker's heart. The ghoul staggers backward, lets out a groan, and falls to the floor. Mary breathes a sigh of relief, but was it really dead? She has to be sure. Retrieving the lantern, she inches closer to the body. He definitely appeared to be dead, but something seemed off. Something wasn't right. She shined the light on the pale, soulless face, but it wasn't a face. It was just a mask. With everything in her screaming to leave it and run, Mary's hand trembles as she reaches down and pulls the mask off. She gasps in horror as Bill's muffled face appears. Well, Bill and Mary should have steered clear of Rocky River Retreat, but what about us? Is it worth seeking out? I definitely believe it is. It feels so unique and fresh, despite being well over 30 years old now. And I should point out that this amazing baseplate is set exclusive, and we also get a handful of accessories I didn't get to highlight in the story. I especially love this clip being used as a fish in the frying pan, and the old shutter connector bricks making up the tree trunks. Notably, the cabin roof slopes were only ever found in 2 other sets. Of course, I had a ton of fun adding a few extra pieces of my own, but even straight out of the box, you're presented with an infinite number of story opportunities. Hopefully, your tale is a little more kind to the horse than mine was. As a side note, I realize that the prospector isn't quite period correct for 1993, but that doesn't change the fact that he's one of my favorite custom minifigures I've ever come up with. And perhaps we'll see him return someday. When all is said and done, I feel like Rocky River Retreat stands apart from all of the gas stations and airports and fire stations we see so often in Classic Town, so you might enjoy this even if you're not the biggest fan of the theme. If you're interested, it generally hovers right around $70 for a used copy, which is identical to its inflation-adjusted retail price, so not too outrageous. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, as well as what kind of stories you'd come up with. The possibilities really are endless. But that's all I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, I'd greatly appreciate you spreading the word with your fellow vintage LEGO fans. I'll be back soon, but until then, this has been Jamie for TrikBrix. As always, take care and play well.